Hi, and welcome to the debut interview series. It's been a little while since we've had debut because of the holidays, but we're so glad to be back, and I am so excited to have the tellers. But first, let me tell you what debut is. If you've been hiding in a cave, then get out and learn debut, because we take three amazing, accomplished storytellers, and they tell their story for the very first time ever for you. You as part of debut. I'm Kevin Cordi. I'm that crazy practitioner of play, so they don't only tell the story, they also play with me with the story direction. And let me introduce our first, let me introduce the teller for this interview series. This teller was a newspaper reporter an editor for more than 25 years and told other people's stories. Now she's telling her own, and we're so glad that she is. She was a native of Pennsylvania, grew up in Newcastle. She received a bachelor's degree in journalism, and she's told all over the place. She's now housed in West Virginia. That's what's on paper. Let me tell you what I know about this teller. A journalist is concerned with creating the right image and picture, but this person creates the right picture and image so that we're there. Having that background in journalism and storytelling, she has a commanding presence of recalling historical accounts or just telling her story. She is now coming in from West Virginia, and as some of you know, my parents are there, so I feel like we're kinfolk. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the talented Judi Tarowsky. Hi, Judi.
Hi, Kevin.
How
I
are
see
you?
we've joined the Red Glasses Club. Yes, I'm fine.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Yes, I never thought I'd go red, but I get more comments on the red, and so I'm a proud member of the Red Glasses Club.
We might be can. You just never know.
And do you get a lot of comments? I get a lot of comments on the Red Glasses.
I do. I do. It's surprising. So,
I say, and I actually talked about this today. I was working on a storytelling thing. I said, I have performance glasses and academic glasses. And honestly, the two have come together just in my life. Teaching and telling should never be separate. And so we should always have that. And as a journalist, would you wear those in your days of a newspaper reporter? And you're still reporting though. So
oh, kind of. But oh my gosh, I've gone through the wire frames, the granny glasses, the great big '80s frames that were terrifying. Um, it's a good place now. I
Well, I
like red frames.
remember I wore my father's glasses when I was in first grade because he'd steal mine by mistake. And he had Buddy Holly glasses, and
Oh,
I was the smallest person in the entire school district. So I had these big old glasses and his Buck Owens watch, which I would steal sometimes just to wear it. And I couldn't see a thing. But I was wearing Papa's glasses. I was wearing Daddy's glasses. So, it's kind of a window to the world, isn't it?
mhm.
And speaking to the window to the world, I always ask this in some way as our first question. What brought you to story, or how did story come to you?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but here we go. Back when I was in junior high, um, this was during the British invasion thing, and people were looking to connect with people in England and Great Britain. And a friend of mine had a cousin in Wales who was looking for a pen pal, and I was looking for a pen pal. So she got the two of us connected, and we started writing to each other, and really found out we liked a lot of the same things and hit it off. Well, after we kept up this correspondence, junior high, high school, and after I graduated, my parents gave me a trip over to visit her in Wales. So I got to spend 3 weeks there with her and her family, and she and I went to London one day, took the train over, and uh, went to St. Paul's Cathedral. Went to the Houses of Parliament. She had their member of Parliament took us through, and I bought a mini skirt and wore it. and scandalized my parents when I got off the airplane with it. But I still have it. I can't wear it anymore, but I still have it. If I ever get to Antiques Roadshow, I'll take it with me because it is an antique. Um, so, she and I kept in touch, through college, and then we kind of fell out of touch. She got married, I got married, we moved around, and through the years, we kind of sporadically make contact with each other. And then, oh, it's been at least more than 10 years ago. I knew where she was living in Wales. It was a little village in the southern part of Wales. And I went on the town's website, and they had a little message board. And I thought, well, this isn't a very big town. I'll post a message if anybody knows her to have her get in contact with me. So I did that. And about a couple of days later, a fellow who lived there says, I don't know her personally, but she's a storyteller and she's performing at this festival this weekend. You might contact the director. So I looked up the web page and the website for the festival, found the director, found where I could contact him, sent him a message to ask her to please get back to me if she wanted to. And within like 24 hours, I had this email like, oh my God, you found me.
Oh.
And here she'd become this award-winning storyteller in Wales, just telling all over the place. And then a couple years later, she and her partner came over they were with a performing group that was going to a Welsh festival in Harrisburg. And they came and stayed with us. We went to Harrisburg with them and went to the festival and met people, did Welsh dancing. And then a couple years later, they came to the Three Rivers Storytelling Festival in Pittsburgh, and they stayed with us, and we went up to that. And that was really the first time I'd ever been to a storytelling festival, and it was amazing. It was just fantastic. So after they left, we went the following year and just really enjoyed it. And then we went over to visit them. And while we were staying with them, Iron looked at me and said, you could be a storyteller. And it never occurred to me that I could do that. And I'd had some theater training, which seemed to go along with it. So we started going to workshops and trying to take classes. And I did an online graduate certificate class through the University of North Texas in storytelling, which was really, really helpful. But mainly doing a lot of workshops, and then just started branching out. And then a couple of storytellers locally, Rich Knoblich from Marshall County and Susanna Holstein, Granny Sue, took me under their wings and mentored me. And it just kind of grew from there. And I just thoroughly enjoy it.
I love it that your first storytelling festival or appearance was all the way in Wales. And let's give credit to who that person was or is. Who is that person?
It's Irene Malin, and her partner is Phil Thomas. He's been a musician over there for years, a storyteller. And of course, we are still in touch. We share stories, and I send them YouTube links, and they send me YouTube links, and it's amazing with the internet. We've been able to connect with people, storytellers in Ireland, Scotland, Wales. It's just amazing.
Well, we haven't had a debuter from Wales yet, so we should be talking. And we're both members of the West Virginia Storytelling Guild, and Granny Sue and
Yes.
we all help each other. I mean, it's just really, really nice. And I love that, hearing often people listening to stories don't think about themselves in the agency of telling. What advice would you give to those people that have that edge that might be, I need to be a teller? What would you tell
Get out and do it. Tell to your family, tell to some friends, um, tell to your stuffed animals. I mean, sometimes when I've been practicing, I, have a stuffed animal or something that I'd tell to, or the cat, if the cat happened to be in the room. Uh, just do it, practice it, um, learn the story, but don't memorize it. When I've worked with students and telling them don't memorize the story, but learn the story, because every time you tell it, it's going to be different.
And the
And
story making process is just as important as the storytelling process. Sometimes
Yes.
all we see is the telling, and we don't realize all the components. What were some challenges in your process of either telling the story? And I was reading on the Shenandoah because I've seen just a piece, or a personal story. What were your challenges in the making of those stories?
Figuring out how, I think figuring out how to get the image in the listener's head. To me, that's what I really enjoy about storytelling. It's that um, you're not showing pictures, you're not doing text up before them. It's you're telling and you're enabling them to form that movie in their head, and they're with you. It might not look the same, but they're seeing something in their heads and they're following that along. I did a performance this last September, and the woman who was kind of like my hostess showing me around the area came to my performance that was at a library, a luncheon meeting, and I told an old fairy tale and a folk tale from the Andrew Lang books, which I just absolutely love.
Yeah, great.
And she said, after it was over, she said, I could see what you were telling. I could see what you were talking about. And that's the whole idea, to get people to see that story, to be there in that story. And that's the biggest challenge, to like, how can I structure the sentences, choose the words, choose the vocal expression, the body language, to get people to experience that with you. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Pablo Picasso once said, painting is another way of keeping a diary. And I think storytelling is a way of painting words so that we get those images. But in your journey, and I don't know if you know this, but I have a credential in journalism. And but to teach high school journalism, which I did news writing, I did a whole bunch of stuff. And what I remember one day is that I was taking a British literature class, and I turned in a paper that was in APA style, that was a journalistic style. And I still remember the professor said, I didn't know what to do with this paper. It's got good material in it, but it was almost like it was a newspaper. And so I only mention this because journalists work for the lead, and I say we need to practice storyography, looking for the story, taking the time. Did you ever have to wrestle with your journalistic background to find the storyteller, and in turn, the storyteller with the journalist?
I think I found that when I was working on the Shenandoah piece, because it is a long form historic narrative. And, as a journalist, you'd open the story with, 14 men died in the horrific crash of a United States Navy airship in Noble County, Ohio on September 3rd, in the early hours during a storm. Okay, where do you go from there?
Right.
It's a newspaper story. But I had to lead into it because I was telling the story. It's about what I call the heroes of the Shenandoah, the people on the ship, the people on the ground. And I had to work that to make that story come alive, to make people see what it was like on that airship, and then what it was like for the people on the ground who came forward to help, the men who survived and to take care of the dead. Uh, it's not a journalistic piece, but I was able to use some journalistic elements in describing things, using quotes to make that story, a living story. And I can remember when I went out to Belleville, Ohio, I wanted to see the sites where the thing crashed. It came down in about 4 pieces. And the late Brian Rayner and his wife uh, have a museum. Now, Brian has passed here a few years ago, but they have like a little travel trailer that they made into this really well done museum of the Shenandoah. And we viewed that, and we went out to the crash sites. And then while we were wrapping up, Brian looked at me, he says, okay, what's your angle for this? What's your angle for this story? Because he was protective of it, because his family was involved. And at that point, I really hadn't found that center for the story. And then it hit me what had been happening all around that day. And I said, it's going to be about the heroes of this, the people who were, these airmen were fighting for their lives on this airship. And the airship was fighting for its life too. I tried to make it a living entity. And then when it crashed, just the way the community came together to care for the survivors and even care for the dead. I mean, the farmers and their wives brought in flowers for the bodies at the funeral home. I mean, they didn't have to do that, but they took care of people. So I just wanted to get that across. I wanted to show that uh, where there was heroism, in both ends. And I think that satisfied him, that I wasn't going to exploit it, um, that I wanted to, accurately present the story of what happened. That's a long answer, I know.
No, and it was a beautiful answer, and I so appreciate it. There was a richness in just the way that you describe it. Honoring the story is what I heard, and inviting us inside. It reminds me. I once had lunch with J. O'Callahan, who really captures historical places, and I was telling him about my father working at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and Jay has this well, he has all kinds of magic, magnificent kind of thing just in the everyday talk of a lunch. And he looked at me and he said, Kevin, you are going to tell that story about Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, aren't you, for your dad? I didn't even think about that. But I had told him that, my dad got off work and I never knew what Plant 2 looked like. I could only go to the gate that he would allow me, and somebody would hand me chewing gum, and I learned that my dad was, an elevator operator, and people would laugh, but then I learned that he did them manually. He like literally lifted the elevators, and there's so much more that I wanted of those stories. And when you're looking at the Shenandoah, or you're looking at the other stories, I think you're giving us an entrance key to come in and sit for a while. Even if it's an eerie tale, I understand you're working on a ghost story.
Yes, I am. That's my debut piece.
Right. And we can tease it a little bit, but we can't tell it. And I'll
No,
stop you in a couple sentences, but tease us just a little bit that moves us to listen.
it comes from an actual experience, um, that I like to say it literally was dropped in my lap. And when you have a story dropped in your lap, you pick it up and you cuddle it and you make nice to it and you work with it for a while, and um, kind of taken it off from there. But I've had some paranormal experiences personally, and we thought this was the case here. Um, my son was with me when it happened, and after, a few minutes later in that evening, it was literally just, well, actually, it was the next day. It was, the story was literally just dropped in my lap, and I thought, oh no, Judi, you have to do something with this. This is, don't let this go to waste. I mean, this is something. So I've been working on it and working on it, and how can I uh, make it a good ghost story? It's not a jump story. I don't tell jump stories. Um, but it could have happened. I mean, we don't know.
The
I
people
don't
that
know why.
it sounds like, well, they say that trouble is the engine of narrative, or suspense drives every story. And you've already baited the hook, so to speak, that we really, I look forward to diving into it with you. And, the people that I know that are ghost researchers, ghost tellers, always say they're telling more than a ghost story.
Hmm.
I mean,
Uh, yeah, ghost stories. They're really human stories. They're stories about life, and I like to tell from the stories of Dr. Patrick Gaynor, uh, James J. Jones, Max Samples.
who's from
Uh,
Clay County, where my mother's from.
yeah, Yes, a fine fiddle player. Oh my goodness. Um,
I
and
hope to
Dr.
one day
Gaynor,
meet him. If yeah.
yeah, and then Dr. Gaynor and I, we figured out we were distant cousins. Uh,
And the other
um,
person, Dr. Jones, I don't know him. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
he was he was a history professor at Glenville State College. He's deceased, but he wrote several books, and I got permission from his family to tell from them. But his went a little bit further than what Dr. Gaynor did. Um, Dr. Jones fleshed things out more into more of a complete stories. Dr. Gaynor interviewed a lot of people and related what they told him and what they were family stories. A lot of ghost stories are family stories. And as like Dr. Jones said, a lot of stories were told as moral tales. This is what happens if you're a bad person. There is justice. And so they're really stories about human behavior. And because some of the things that happen after people are no longer physically here, it still makes it a human story. And
And while
I
we're
just
giving
find
credit, I mean, Ruth Music, of course, in West Virginia
yes,
storytelling there. I mean, everybody should come to West Virginia, but for the stories especially.
mhm.
You're right. It's about people. So somewhere in all that, play comes a factor. So how important is play, or what is play to you in the context of your story making or storytelling?
For me, it's how can I put this together, or how would it look? How would it sound if I did it this way? Do I need to add this? Do I need to take this out? Uh, and sometimes, even if I'm preparing to tell a story, something might pop into my head, like the day before, like, oh, I need to add this, and I think this will make it better, or I need to take this out. And in playing with stories, even is uh, sometimes you're planning to tell a particular story, at an event, and I describe it as like you get another story that's tapping you on the shoulder. Say, no, tell me. You need to tell me. And I've had that happen several times, and I've listened to that story that's tapping me on the shoulder and told it, and that the story is like it's very relieved. It needed to be told. And to me, that's playing with story because it's like having, two people in front of you saying, you need to do this task. No, you need to do this task. Who are you going to listen to?
And I love what you say that some stories cry out to be cuddled. When they're tapping you on the shoulder or they're landing in your lap, that we got to hold firm to them, or that in folktale, they'll come back and they'll come after you.
Hmm.
Get out of the story bag. I've had it where I'm telling for an audience and another story pops in my head.
Hmm.
And I have to say, come down, stay down, stay down, stay down. But I'm like, but this is a really interesting route. But play also lets us have the opportunity of exploring that possibility. And I have found working with others, I mean, as a journalist, you showed your work when it was done and an editor needed to revise it. In play and story, I want people um, uh, su- uh, to invite invitations for others to listen and make suggestions throughout the process because we're stronger when we work together. What do you think?
Absolutely. I had a very good experience with that back when I was starting to tell stories. I entered the uh, the Strand Theater Storytelling Festival in Moundsville. The first year they had it, they had a liar's contest, and that's really when I tested myself. I went in and told a story, and I told myself, well, if even if you don't win, if you're not terrified, keep it up. I won. There were three of us competing. I mean, I won, but I won. So the next year, I had to kind of defend my title, and I told another tall tale, and Carmen Didi was one of the judges, and I came in second only because my mouth went absolutely dry and I could not speak. It's just horrible. But anyway, afterwards, she made a suggestion that for a part of my story that she said, you might want to try this. I said, okay. So I added that to my story, followed her suggestion, and it works. It makes it better. And so she was able to offer me that play, that suggestion, and like work with it a little bit, and it absolutely worked for me. So
And when Carmen Didi says something like, "I have a suggestion," she's thought about it, and
yeah,
she's moving forward. And those who don't know Carmen Didi get to know her. She's considered the Robin Williams of storytelling sometimes, but then she can take a moment and hold it still and make you go, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." But she's a great listener too, as you're showing. And we need to laugh together. We need to listen together. Um, but the tradition of storytelling has often been we just show the telling, and storytellers need to come together, and that's why the debut happened. In fact, I hear from people who will email me and say that one suggestion I got from Simon Brooks or Misty Maynor or Ed Stivender or soon to be Judy um, made me take my story a different way. And that's just so beautiful to hear. Um, and so I look forward to just diving into play with your story. When is debut, Judy? And I'll help you if you don't know.
it's at 2 o'clock on Sunday, January 30th.
Eastern Standard Time, because we get people as far as India that come. And during debut we play with story directions, so people who are watching often give suggestions to you as you're telling the story. And I've also heard from those tellers that say, "Oh, wow." Paul Strickland said, I love this idea. I'm going to run with it. I don't know where it's going to go. And that's the beauty that works on. Um,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, and sometimes you find that when you're telling a story, you think that you're projecting a certain emotion. You think you're projecting a thought, a feeling, and a listener might be getting something totally different. I know when I was doing a story during my University of North Texas work, I do a personal story called Dancing in the Street about when I was a child, how my brother put out a record player out in the evening and played records, and kids just showed up to dance under the
Wow.
street light. And at one point, one of our neighbor girls came up to me and uh, said, "Come on, let's dance." Because I really wanted, I was like 7 years old. She said, "Come on, let's dance." And when I was telling it, um, one of the people listening later said, "I felt an element of danger there. For some reason, it just seemed like something bad could happen.
Wow.
Can you change that a little bit that it doesn't feel so dangerous?" And I thought, oh, wow, okay. That hadn't even occurred to me. And then when I thought about it, I could see where she was right. That, okay, maybe I don't want someone to feel that this is something sinister. This was a joyous 1950s thing, kids dancing. Nobody called the cops. It was amazing. Um, but I changed it, and it made it better.
And that's why storytelling is a co-creative art when it's done well. It's the listeners, it's the tellers, it's that cinepatical moment. But it's also, I always say that the best storytellers arrive a half hour early and leave a half hour late, if they can, because they tell you afterwards the picture that you gave to them that you could use, or the language, or I remember doing a show for World War II vets, and with a number of people. Rachel Hedman was one of them when I was living in California. And the one guy, he was very gruff. He came up and he said, "It was a good show, but we didn't have M1 rifles back then." And that was the beautiful compliment, because out of all that he could think, it was just that inaccuracy. But it was a good show, is what I concentrated on. And I changed, yeah, but I did do some research. There were M1 rifles.
Mhm. Maybe his unit didn't have them, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe he wanted them and needed them.
Well, one of the scariest things for me talking about having someone who lived that experience, I told my Shenandoah story to the Lighter Than Air Society group up in Akron, the library. And these guys worked at Goodyear. They built airships. I
Wow.
mean, they had artifacts.
Wow.
And I told my story to them. And I thought, oh dear, if there's anything wrong, if I'm off, they'll tell me about it. And as I was telling it, I could see the guys sitting out there just nodding their heads, nodding their heads. I thought, okay. And I was telling that experience to some other storytellers, and one of them said, that must have been like defending a dissertation. Yeah, I did, but I guess it would. But it was, yeah, you make sure you have it right.
Right.
And
And if you're honestly wrong, it's okay as long as you're open to change.
yeah,
And play is a vehicle upon which you can make those mistakes, and then you can explore them later. Because play is about the possible, the impossible, the wonder, the curiosity, and it's also a place where you didn't think of this, but a golden eagle came up, or whatever the case may be. And you can check historical accuracy, but you're in the mode of play, so you're given permission. The secret, though, Judi, is play is the real work we do. Play is the strength of the storyteller. I'm biased. I'm a player, but I'm biased. But I believe in it, and I have strength and support, and that's part of why debut is debut.
I'm
Um,
looking forward to the help that I'll get from
uh,
debut.
a co-creative work, so I'm going to learn from you as well, Judi. And the cool thing is that, some tellers have never met each other, or they know, or they've just heard each other, and they get to respond. And we have people that still correspond, long after debut. I'm hoping it helps form community. And we be a little unpredictable, and we give ourselves a opportunity to be in a safe place, because the fear lessens when we all are there for the same reason. Um, I'm just curious, what is the most unexpected thing that happened to you during a storytelling event?
What an unexpected thing. Oh dear. Um, well, was kind of this last summer. I was down at Ripley, the Cedar Lakes Mountain State Art and Crafts Festival, and I was telling my version of Sodi Saleratus, which I kind of take it in a little different direction. And I have a squirrel. Of course, there's a squirrel in it, but my squirrel does a little bit differently. And I was talking about the squirrel, member of the family, and he did this and he did that. This little girl was sitting down front, and she raised her hand, and she looked like she was really, really anxious about something. I don't mind answering a child's question like that. I figure something is really bothering them.
Sure.
I'll try to answer it. So I said, well, what, you have a question? She said, was that a red squirrel or a gray squirrel? And I said, well, it was a red squirrel. It was a little fox squirrel. She says, oh, okay. And then we went right on.
She needed the
And
picture. She
she
needed
needed
the picture.
her, and she knew that there were red squirrels. She knew there were gray squirrels.
I love
And
it.
that was important to her. So, but I was seeing the red squirrel, so yeah, he's a red squirrel.
I remember performing, and a little girl came up and she said, "Thank you for the movie." And I thought, I'm not correcting her. It was the movie
Hmm.
for her mind. It was the imagination. It was the possibility. And we need to do that more often. We also need to say thank you more often. Often, a teller, especially new tellers, will get on story slams or digital slams, and they don't get the feedback, because people are intimidated or embarrassed, or it's just not the standard practice to get up and say, "Thank you for taking me to that direction," or and invite comments of suggestion when they're invited. You don't walk up and go, "Well, here are the three things you did wrong." Instead, I've learned so much from the value of thank you, and the value of deep listening, and in play we can also, like, you can say, "I'm really wrestling with the end of this. Pay particular attention, because it's your telling. It's where you go." And hopefully it moves others to think differently about storytelling. So, what's your challenges in the next 5 years outside of COVID land, or it can be COVID land, as a storyteller, as a story maker, as a performer, and as part of the debut family?
What are my challenges? Well, maybe just to expand my telling, maybe to have other opportunities to tell, um, to grow as a storyteller. Um, I'm at the tender age that I think I still have room to grow. I mean, I know I still have room to grow as a storyteller. Um, what time and age will do for me, I don't know, but I'm going to do my best to keep upright and breathing and telling and everything. So, because I came to storytelling late in life, I really did. And I remember when I was working on the University of North Texas, and I really found that I enjoyed it and could do it. I remember thinking, I don't have a lot of time to get good. It's just one of those things. It's okay. There's a number of years out there. How long can I keep going? And I do want to keep going because I think it keeps the mind sharp. Um, I just think it's something to aspire to, because if once you quote retire, you need to keep the brain going. You need to have something going. And I think storytelling, creatively and physically, will help do that.
Judy, there's too many people that sit in the lobby waiting for the permission. Um, we need to, like you said, from the first point of advice, to come in and tell and just get better from telling and listening and going to places like the place in Texas, or listening to another teller, or being on debut. Um, I don't want those people in the lobby waiting for someone to say to them, "You're good enough." I want them to realize that there's room at the table, but to realize it's a platform that requires energy. It's a platform that requires rehearsal. It's a platform that requires play, and just really, it's an art. And so you get better when you do it, but more importantly, when you reflect about the process. So let's get those people out of the lobby and put them on the kitchen table, or the dinner, but they got to wash the dishes too. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and I,
that's when you can work on a story. When
right,
you're washing the dishes. I mean, how many
exactly.
times you're doing something, you can be going through it, in your mind. At least that's what I do. I don't know.
I had the pleasure of being at the Heidemann Settlement School in Kentucky, and so washing. These are the best Appalachian writers together through study for a week, and you work with them. But I'm washing, dishes with Silas House, Gurney Norman, all these people, George Ella Lyons. I mean, we wash the dishes. We have our workshops, and I think building that community is really important, because I've seen it where a writer's at a table and people are 3 stories high watching like a surgery thing.
Hmm.
Debut's not that.
No.
And the West Virginia Storytelling Guild is not that. Um, and Judy, we're so glad that you're telling, and the gifts that you bring, and the research that you move forward, and welcome to the debut family.
Well, thank you. I'm honored and thrilled to be here.
And
Really. I mean, can't
we
wait.
could talk a lot, but Judy, I am going to give you the last word.
If you think you want to be a teller, if you think you would enjoy getting up in front of people, do it. I mean, don't hesitate. Find a story that you enjoy, learn it, tell it to your family. I mean, maybe tell it to a gathering. If you're going to a family reunion or a picnic or something, tell a story. I mean, you might have kids gather around you, and then you'll find that, with those kids, there'll be adults sitting on the edge. They might be acting like they're not listening, but they're listening. A lot of times when Rich Knoblich and I tell at Ogilvy, the campfire tellings, we'll have, youngsters, they might be crawling around in their chairs. They're listening, but the adults are listening, and they are enjoying these stories just as much as the kids are. So there's always a place for story. We all need to hear that. Um, there's been studies, and I just love this. There's been studies that when storytellers and an audience are in sync, um, their brain waves start coordinating, their heart rates start synchronizing, and to feel that sense of community through story, um, it's sacred. It really is. So for heaven's sakes, don't be afraid. Get up and tell. No one's going to laugh at you. And if they do, so what?